And I'm going to start with our first session for the conference, which is Modern Projects on the Past. And this panel is organized around the modern reception of ancient tradition, from physical archaeology on gold in Sudan to literary archaeology, translating the steppes and Viking past into modern fiction. Our panelists this morning will explore themes of current projects that connect us deeply with our history. And our first speaker for this session will be Dr. Budka. And this paper was by Dr. Budka and Huda Magzoub al-Bashir. Huda is a Sudanese archaeologist and has worked as a museum curator at Khartoum. She is a specialist on Egyptian and Nubian pottery from the New Kingdom and has collaborated with Dr. Budka and her projects inside and between Attab and Ferka since 2013. Huda has also participated in several workshops and conferences on Sudanese archaeology, both in Sudan and internationally. And we also have Dr. Budka here with us today, who is a professor of Egyptian archaeology and art at LMU Munich. She holds a PhD in Egyptology from the University of Vienna, and she was a researcher at Humboldt University Berlin, University of Vienna, and the Austrian Academy of Sciences. Her specialty fields are Egyptian field archaeology and material culture, and her current research focus is on cultural diversity in the Nile Valley during the late Bronze Age based on material remains. Dr. Budka conducts excavations in Egypt and Sudan, both at funerary and settlement sites, especially at Luxor, the SASA, and between Attab and Ferka. And today, Dr. Budka will be presenting the Munich University Attab to Ferka Survey Project 2018 to 2023, Archaeology, Gold and Landscape. Welcome.
Thank you so much. So hello and many thanks to the organizers for accepting our contribution about the project in Sudan. And we will be talking about the connections between archaeology, gold and landscape. And we will do this throughout the ages, so really connecting the past to the present. As we already heard, this is a modern project on the past, but since the main author of this paper is Huda Magzoub, and she's a Sudanese archaeologist, this is also an example about archaeology in very challenging times, in times of war. And Huda, because of the current war in Sudan, is unfortunately not able to join us today, but she sent me a very brief video and I would like to show it to you so that you can also meet the main author of this paper. So I will play the video and I hope the audio is working. If not, please give me a signal.
My name is Huda Magzoub. I was born here in Khartoum, studying in Budka from Khartoum University. I have a master's diploma from Khartoum University. And also, before that, I have mentioned history diploma from Munich University. I work as archaeologist curator from National Foundation for History Museums, the National Museum. Also, I work with different missions from different areas in Sudan. I would like some ancient where and this conference theme. Professor Ferka shared with us article presented by her about the Ferka Survey Project, the vast area where Nubian people live. Because everybody knows this war until now running and going in Khartoum and different areas in Sudan. This war pushed me and my family to live in Western Sudan. In this area, I found really difficult to study internet access. About all that, I would like to treat the and science. My name is Huda.
Sorry. Sorry for this. So now you met Huda, and we can turn to the main subject again. So I will be talking about the so-called Munich University Attab to Ferka Survey Project that is working in a specific part of northern Sudan. You can see it on the map. It's just located south of the so-called Batn el Hagar and the Dal Cataract. We believe it's a kind of a contact zone throughout the ages between different cultural groups, and it's really something that we can call a kind of a border zone because of the natural topography and the environment. This is why it's from the archaeological point of view extremely interesting. And we want to investigate this part of the Nile with a so-called biography of a landscape approach, also considering the longue durée of this part of the Middle Nile. We know since the 1970s, because there was a French archaeologist with a team working in this part, that it's a very rich archaeological area. We have several hundreds of sites. This is just a brief screenshot of our GIS database, where you can see that we have more than 300 sites. A lot of them have been surveyed already or documented in the 1970s by André Villard. We have relocated most of them, but what is most important, we have also documented additional sites. So you really see it's worth to go back into regions where there have been previous archaeologists working. What we are especially interested in is to see the development throughout the ages. So here you can see one example of a map showing all the prehistoric sites that are partly far away from the modern Nile, whereas in medieval times, the sites are very close to the modern Nile. So it really shows us that we do have a large difference throughout the time period. And this brings me again to this landscape biography approach that we follow. We really want to understand in detail the environmental parameters in order to reconstruct our context space biography, because we really want to know the individual life cycles of human, animals, plants, technologies, objects, and all of this in social spaces, in those context spaces where really different groups of people were coming together. And this example that you can see on the screen shows you a very, very distinctive distribution of sites on the right part of your screen. I hope you can see my mouse, is where you can see those Bronze Age sites, so from the 2nd millennium BCE. And thanks to a cooperation with the German Aerospace Center, we got some really interesting so-called SAR data, where you can see that we are able to already have a better understanding via remote sensing on the past waterscapes, and that there was a completely different ancient Nile channel system, and the ancient Nile was not where the modern Nile is today. So this is, I think, a really good example of how exciting it is to go into detail about the distribution of the sites and why they are located where we find them and why they are not located in a different place and what changes throughout the periods. Another thing I need to mention, especially since we have those 1970 data from André Villard and his team, is the state of preservation. Northern Sudan has experienced a lot of development in the last years. So a lot of modern technologies have happened. Electricity was just introduced a few years ago. The asphalt road you can see on the large picture was also just built a few years ago. So this very remote area of Northern Sudan has on one hand a big advantage now in terms of for the modern population and in terms of modernity and with electricity and everything in infrastructure. But on the other hand, we are facing destruction of the archaeological sites with the asphalt road, with the electricity posts, and also with modern gold working. And I will be coming back to the issue of modern gold working at the end of this talk. What we want to do today is that we give you a very, very brief snapshot of what we have been doing in the last years. We have been excavated several sites. I highlight here on the map 3 sites that were very interesting, 2 cemeteries on the east bank, Guinness East 002 here at the bottom, Guinness East 003 in the center, and on the other side, on the west bank, we do have Attab West 001. They are all dating to what we call the Bronze Age, to the 2nd millennium BCE, and I will highlight this so-called Kerma cemetery. Kerma is one of the most important African early cultures that is kind of connected to northern Sudan. And then we will move to this settlement place on the West Bank. So let's start with this Kerma cemetery. It was documented in the 1970s, but not excavated. It's a very huge cemetery, probably more than 150 tombs. We were able to excavate 58 burials over the last 2 years. We have excavated 5 trenches. You can see them on the slide. And what was kind of a surprise for us, since we expected from the surface finds that it's a Kerma cemetery, that in the center of our excavation, we found this trench visible here on the slide. And this very shallow burial pit that you can see on the photo and also on the map is something we know very well from a much more northern part of Sudan, from what we call so-called Lower Nubia. And we connect these burials with the so-called Pan grave group. And this is a nomadic group, a pastoral group. And it was really exciting to find such a tomb in our excavation, where we expected to have only properly well-known and established Kerma remains. This becomes maybe even better understandable if we look on some details within the tomb. So you can see that the burial was looted, but we still had quite nice remains. We had several goat offerings, and one of the goats, and you can see it in the photo and in the drawing, one of the goat had probably a horn protector. This is something that you find very commonly with pastoral groups, and some of the pottery was very well preserved, and it again allows us to associate this burial with the so-called Pangrave group. If we look at other burials in our cemetery, we found more common Kerma-style burials. And this is one of the highlights, where you can see a looted burial, but this burial still had 2 ivory amulets still in situ hanging on the neck. And I've brought you one example from a pen museum, where you can see that these pendants are very common in the Kerma culture, and they are very often gilded. So they have ivory, maybe gold. So it's really a luxury, and it's for sure a status symbol. And in addition, we found very high class, very well-made typical Kerma pottery. So to make it short, this burial and others illustrate us that the local community really had access to valuable materials and to valuable objects. And how can we explain this? This is a very, very brief summary of what we think about our cemetery. We think this cemetery is well suited to provide us with a new understanding of what was previously established in Nubian archaeologists, what you could call boxes, where you put in some cultural groups, archaeological groups, for example, the Kerma people, the Pangrave people. This was, of course, necessary in the 20th century, when we had not so much material evidence and little archaeological excavations and everything. But I think now we definitely move forward, and we have more material, and it's unsurprisingly much more complicated. So this cemetery is a very nice example that within one community, you have what archaeology would normally divide in Kerma and Pangrave. And this division, of course, makes no sense. We have to focus on what was really happening there in terms of social practice, who was living there, how were they communicating with each other, how were the cooperating with each other. And we believe that those Pangrave people that were buried here were definitely part of the social structure in the past. And it remains at the moment tentative whether they had a specific space in the cemetery or whether they were kind of, whether this is an illusion because we did not excavate the complete cemetery. For us, it's most striking that we know that the Kerma people were agro-pastoralist people, so doing both agriculture and pastoralism, and they had now close connections with those nomadic people that we associate with the Pangrave culture. And the Pangrave culture is also known to have been integrated in the so-called gold enterprise, in gold mining. And so we think that this might be one of the explanations why this community was having access to valuable materials and was having a kind of a really nice, wealthy status because it was composed of so many different agents and so many different people. And this is something I think we tend to overlook in archaeology, that it's very often a question of seasonality. If we talk about practices like gold working and other activities, also the herding issue, the agricultural issue, you cannot do agriculture all over the year, especially not in northern Sudan, etc., etc. So there are many, many things to consider. And in general, we have to consider the dynamics of past communities. And in the present, this was, maybe a little bit simplified. And our example, I believe, is one of the very good case studies to show that it was much, much more complex. Let's move quickly to this other side. I promised you that we will visit. It's located in Attab West, on the West Bank. You can see its location on this map and also a photo. It's a quite small site. It was probably located on a former island because I told you the channels were completely different in the 2nd millennium BCE. And we were interested in the site because the surface was completely covered with schist stone and with pottery, with ceramics. And we could date this pottery very well to the so-called early New Kingdom, to the Egyptian Empire. And we also did find a lot of evidence for quartz crushing. Why is this interesting? Well, in this part of the Nile Valley, gold mining works in extracting the quartz and then crushing the quartz, and then you get the gold flake. So this is why we think also this site is somehow connected to gold mining. And I will make this very short about this site, but we had really interesting remains. We had mud brick debris, we had a large midden deposit on the site, but interestingly, no built architecture. We had a lot of storage pits. So our current hypothesis is that this site on a former island was maybe something like a seasonal market, a meeting point. And since the pottery is both Egyptian and partly imported from Egypt, partly locally made, and also in the indigenous Nubian style, we think it was maybe a meeting point between different groups, Nubians, Egyptians, Kerma Nubians, Pangrave Nubians, and others, and presumably connected with the gold mining expeditions, because the gold working sites are located a little bit further into the desert from this site. Well, we have worked on this topic, gold working and resource management in Bronze Age Nubia very recently. We have published this a volume that just came out earlier this year, where we focused on Bronze Age gold working. And I tried in this book to focus on the evidence from our Moors concession, considering the case studies I just presented to you, but also more evidence. And I also want to stress that my colleague Bruce Williams has a wonderful site in the 4th cataract of the Nile, so much further south of our concession, which is Hoshel Guruf. And there he also found a gold processing center of the Bronze Age. So there's more evidence coming up now from archaeology. And in general, this slide should give you again an overview that our concession marked in red is really within the center of what we know already from ancient texts, from Egyptian hieroglyphic texts and royal inscription, that was the so-called Gold of Kush mining area. And what is now the new interesting thing is that we believe, and we have evidence that gold mining activity was going on in this part of the Nile Valley much earlier than those texts say, much earlier than the Egyptian New Kingdom, but really in the so-called Kerma period. And I could give you several examples from our concession. I restricted to this one nice case study where we had a site that was already surveyed by a villa in the 1970s with possible huts for gold mining, with maybe a basin for gold washing, with rock art that is that is associated with the Kerma period, and with a Kerma cemetery nearby. So it's really all coming together. Plus, we had a lot of quartz crushing attested at this site and at many other sites. So we really have the means to say that Kerma gold working was happening in this part of the Nile Valley. Well, some of you might wonder, okay, and what is the big deal about this? Well, it's a big deal because it helps us revising modern concepts of ancient gold working in Nubia. I have to make this kind of simple and short, but the general assumption is that Nubia and the land of Kush was the land of gold for the pharaohs, and that it was only the Egyptians who exploited the gold in Nubia, and that Nubians were kind of sitting on their gold without using it actively. And you can already envision why this was the case. Well, it's both ancient colonialism and modern colonialism, because in the ancient texts tell us that it was only the Egyptians coming there and doing it and exploiting the Nubians. And we do have the pictorial evidence that you can see on the slide that Nubians were bringing gold and other exotic products to the Egyptians. And then, of course, it was the modern colonial approach that the Egyptians are associated within the Mediterranean larger area, and Nubia is African, and the Nubian people are black people. And so this is why, of course, the Egyptians were the ones who kind of actively exploited gold and made all the wonderful things that you know from the tomb of Tutankhamun and much more. But of course, this is not the case. So we can challenge those established narratives by means of archaeology. I have showed you already the evidence from the Moabs concession. We do have those wonderful Kerma golden objects like this fly or this a sheet decoration of a funerary bed. So this really shows us there were indigenous uses of gold by the Kerma and by the Nubian people. And last but not least, we have this wonderful evidence from Rochelle Gourouf by Bruce Williams and others, where we have a Kerma gold working site with what could be called new technology, because they found a large of those grinding stones, grinding mills that were again used for crushing the quartz. And in previous times, previous researchers assumed that those grinding stones were imported from the Egyptians, like by the Egyptians, brought by the Egyptians to Nubia. And we are now really challenging this picture and starting to better understand how much there was an exchange and an intermingling between Nubia and Egypt. Yeah, and in the last part of this presentation, I quickly want to refer to modern gold working, because this is a real problem and issue in northern Sudan, not only in my concession, but also in other parts. I just show you some examples of modern gold working in the region. We have been monitoring them since we started our work. We are in very good cooperation with the locals, and we also try to explain to them why archaeological sites should be protected and why it's not okay to destroy archaeological sites. The biggest threat, of course, in terms of types of sites are the ancient gold working sites, because as you can imagine, where in antiquity there was a gold mine, also the modern gold miners want to continue there. And so gold mining sites are destroyed, cemeteries are destroyed, and rock art sites are destroyed. And they are partly using really a huge equipment, like you can see on the slide, and they destroyed a large areas. And in the current time of war, we are very, very grateful to our local contacts like Magzoub Hassan, who is always updating me when he finds some new company coming or individual gold miners who do it on a small scale, and he tries to talk with them and tries to tell them they should go further into the desert because here is archaeology. Whoops, sorry. And with this, I come to the kind of a summary and a short outlook. It's kind of really a part of a paradoxon, I would say. We do have ancient gold working business in our region as one case study that really new perspectives on long established narratives like the active Egyptians, the passive Nubians are urgently needed. And on the other hand, modern gold working is one of the biggest threats for exactly the same archaeology. We furthermore think we really have to imagine our gold working business in antiquity as something that we could label archaeology of interaction, so that the Nubian gold working throughout the ages was always in close exchange with the northern neighbors. They wanted to sell the gold to the Egyptians, but they were actively doing so. They also cooperated with the eastern desert groups, the nomads. Why? Because they needed the expertise in the deserts. The Nubians were living in the Nile Valley, and they needed contact with the nomads. So it was always about the cooperation. And this is again the nice thing, that how gold bridges kind of the past and until the present, because as much as it was cooperation in the past, it's also cooperation in the present, because we now really need the help of our Sudanese colleagues, but also of our Sudanese friends and local inhabitants in order to document and preserve the cultural heritage of Sudan. And with this, I would like to thank you all for your kind attention. I'm looking forward to questions. We are very, very grateful to all our colleagues of the National Corporation for Antiquities and Museums of Sudan, and of course to all our local workmen and to our team members. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julia. And I'm glad that we were able to also meet Huda at the beginning of the presentation. So please send our thanks to Huda for me.
I will, thank you.
So I do have a number of questions from the chat for you. First, when discussing gold working in the space, are you thinking of it as a secondary activity during the off seasons for agriculture as opposed to a year-round activity? And then the second part to that question is, then in that case, does that mean that it wasn't as much of a specialization for individuals, so much as a secondary activity for a broader set of people?
That's an excellent question. I would say it depends on the context, and it depends where you were gold mining. I showed you this one map where you could see those large areas of the gold of Kush that covers both the Nile Valley, but also the desert on the east and on the west bank. And I believe that doing something like that we call wadi working, where in the ancient, now dry riverbeds, the quartz is visible on the surface, they could more or less do the gold mining almost all year round, I would say. But I firmly believe that since it required people, and since it required the local communities wanted to use the gold, but they also needed people who know the desert and know the path in the desert, and they know where to find the gold. That especially the gold mining further into the desert was probably a seasonal thing. So an excellent question. We are working on this. For now, I would say very complex, very dynamic, probably situational. And as much as we now know that there were so many mixtures of pastoralism, like not only pure pastoralism, but also agro-pastoralism and other parts, I would also say this gold mining business is probably something that could have various shades. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to be excited to follow your research and see where we go with this.
Thank you so much.
And then the next question from the chat is, are there examples of gold worked objects that were found in Egypt that you believe were likely crafted in Nubia, Kerma? or is it still too early to build a concept of the style of Nubian Kerma works to try and match that?
Mm-hmm. That's another excellent question. There was a recent publication from last year where colleagues from the Petrie Museum in London, and I think also from a Spanish university, I forgot the name unfortunately, tried to sample objects found in Egypt with scientific methods in order to find out whether it's Nubian gold or Egyptian gold, because also in the Egyptian Eastern Desert, you do have gold mines. This was especially done for those fly pendants that I showed, because the Egyptians modernized this type of fly pendant, and we have poor gold fly pendants from the early 18th dynasty. To make it short, the results were not clear. So the results were not as what you would expect, that you can really differentiate the gold. And this is probably connected to the way it is processed. And furthermore, and this would bring me again to this aspect of cooperation, I personally believe we should be a little bit, we have moved forward from asking the question, is it Egyptian or is it Nubian? But we want to understand, how was it made? By whom was it made? Who was involved? And it's probably, again, more complicated than we think. And so trying to separate it does not really bring us further. We should really try to understand the proper process from the beginning. And we are making progress here, but it's still a long story.
Yeah, it's interesting. And when I think about it, one of the nice characteristics of gold is that you can easily melt it down too. So even if it was from Nubia, for example, once it goes up to Egypt, people can melt it down. But was that trade or was it just reused?
Exactly, yes, exactly.
Okay. I think those are all the questions we have today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again for having us. I will pass on the greetings to Huda, and I will be following this conference with great interest. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Julia. Have a great one.